All right, good evening, fifth graders. Today we are going to quickly recover common denominators. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to rename two or more fractions to have common denominators using least common multiple. Pause the video quick and go ahead and write down that in your notes. Okay, what are common denominators? Common denominators are just like they sound. It is two or more fractions with a common or the same denominator. For example, these two fractions have the same denominator, 3/15 and 8/15. The 15 is the same. These two do not have a common denominator. On this one we have 12 and we have 23, so they are not common. So common denominators are two fractions that have the same denominator. Why do we need common denominators? There are a few reasons we need to be able to find common denominators. It is easier to compare fractions when you have a common denominator. It is easier to put fractions in numerical order when you have a common denominator. It is easier to add fractions and to subtract fractions when you have a common denominator. We're going to look at using the least common multiple to find a common denominator. A multiple is what you get when you multiply a number by other numbers. You're going to want to write the word multiple down in your vocabulary. For example, if I take 4 and I take 4 times 1, I get 4. 4 times 2, I get 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16, and so on. When I do that, 4, 8, 12, 16, they become my multiples of 4. So the multiples of 4 are 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, and so on and so forth as I continue to multiply. Using least common multiple to find a common denominator. When you have two fractions with different denominators, you want to find a denominator that they have in common. Then you write an equivalent fraction for each one of the fractions using the common denominator. If you find a common multiple, you can find a common denominator. So let's take a look at how to do this. Let's take the fractions 3/5 and 3/4, and let's look at the denominator. So the denominator here is 5. So I'm going to look at the denominator here, and it's 4. They are not common because they are not the same. The first step I want to do is list the multiples of each of these. So 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 2 is 10. I'm recording during dismissal time, so you will hear that a little bit. 5 times 3 is 15, and so forth. You can go as far as you think you might need to go. If you need to add more, you can add more. So let's do the multiples of 4. So the multiples of 4 are 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, and so on and so forth. So the first step is to list the multiples of both of the denominators. Once you have both of the denominators, so those are my ones there, and then I list mine 4, I can see that 20 is in common in both of them. That means if I have 5 and I multiply it by a number, I will get 20. And if I have 4 and I multiply it by a number, I will get 20, which would be in common. Your next step is to put up your two fractions, and you're going to do a comparison. So you're going to take your 3/5 and you are going to create a fraction that is equivalent to 3/5, but you want the denominator to be your common denominator, the common multiple you found, 20. The same with 3/4. You want to equal it to another fraction where the denominator is 20 because 20 was our common multiple. Now what you're looking for is the numerator. And we can do the same thing we talked about in class if you don't know the numerator. You figure out, well, 4 times what gave me 20? Well, 5. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 3 times 5 is 15 twentieths. Right here. If I have to get to 20, I times by 4. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top, times by 4, I get 12 twentieths. I now have 3/5. An equivalent fraction of 3/5 is 12 twentieths. I have 3/4. An equivalent fraction of 3/4 is 15 twentieths. And I've ended up with two fractions that have common denominators. Now, I can order them, I can compare them, I can add them, or I can subtract them. Anything I need to do with it. All right? And there we go. I have two equivalent fractions. I was comparing 3/5 to 3/4. And now I can do those two. All right? I want you to go ahead and try on 2/6, 4/8. Find a common, make 2 and 6, or 2 6 and 4/8 into a pair of fractions with common denominators, 6/13 and 7/8, 12/15 and 5/9, and bring them to class tomorrow. Have a good night.